Hello and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. In this one, myself and George from Ingenuity Fantasy will be putting together our player rankings list. We've got 6 categories. We've got a top 10 list for each. So it's budget defenders, budget mids, premium mids, budget forwards, premium forwards. If you haven't checked out Ingenuity Fantasy, then do check it out. There's all sorts of cool stuff on there. They've got articles on differentials, captains, fixtures, all sorts of good stuff. They've got the rankings we're going to be talking about today, and they've got a transfer wizard, which is a really cool tool. You basically put in what position you need, what amount you've got to spend on that position, and it will give you a ranked list of players to consider. But yeah, do check out Ingenuity Fantasy. The link is in the description to the video. But for now, let's get into the player rankings.
Hi guys, welcome back to Game Week 2 FPL player rankings. As always, we will get started with the budget defenders. I think probably a good place to start will be the glaring omission of Anderson from my lists and Brad having him at number 1. Now, for me, the main foundation for that is Fulham's fixtures. I think, they've got Man United next. Man United did not look shabby at all. They look very capable of scoring goals. And then they've got Chelsea in, the week after that. And then they've got Villa at the back end of those 5 who, also are more than capable of scoring goals. So I just think, when you're talking about cheap defenders, they just tend to be, especially ones who aren't there for attacking output, they just tend to be at the mercy of their fixtures a bit more than, ones who can offer stuff going forward.
Yeah, I do agree. But now that we've got these defensive contributions, I do kind of think that those sort of fixtures are prime for defensive contributions. Not that that's what you should just be targeting, of course, but I do also think that Fulham's defence is a little bit underrated. So, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not gonna come up with like back-to-back 15 pointers or anything. But I do think that he is just at that price for now the best option, even though the fixtures aren't the best.
Yeah, and it's completely fair. I think what we will see is, especially in games where teams will be under attack a lot, I think there is every chance that they can get these defensive contributions. It's just always really tough because lots of things, there's so much variation around it that hanging your hat on defensive contributions when it's inherently quite a random stat, I think just tends to be a potentially risky strategy. But, one place I think we can be a bit more confident in, now, even though they did go down to 10 men and, that will inevitably affect them, I think Aston Villa's defence showed that, they actually looked pretty solid. Their fixtures, Brentford, who have looked way off the pace, Palace, who are losing Eze, and then Everton, who looks way off the pace, and then Sunderland, and then Fulham. As defensive fixtures go, that is a fantastic sequence of defensive fixtures, and that's why you see, the likes of Cash and Dean quite high for me.
Yeah, I do. I completely agree with you. The fixtures are unbelievable. That's why last week Konza was pretty high on my list.
Yeah,
obviously Konza's now suspended for the next game week. Konza would be pretty high on my list still, probably top 3. But I've just got problems with both Cash and Dean. It's not the Villa defence that I don't like, because I like that. It's more that I do think Maatsen will get minutes. Yeah. So I'm not sure that Dean's completely nailed. And then, I don't know, we keep seeing a lot of speculation about Cash actually leaving. So who knows? He's been linked with Forest quite heavily. I don't know if that will actually come off or not. But I just don't think that these 2 players are particularly nailed for minutes over the next 5 weeks. But I do completely agree on the Aston Villa defence. I think the fixtures are great. And they held their own with 10 men.
Yeah, and I think it's partly that reason why I think we can feel fairly confident, at least in the immediate short term, that Cash and Dean might get the nod in the next couple games. If you're part of a defence which keeps out a good attack like Newcastle, and actually play very well back there, and keep them to 0 goals, then I think that's probably a defence that you want to see Emery go with next game, just because they were able to keep out high-powered attacks. So my only thinking, if they leaked a ton of goals, I think I'd be a lot more, even if they had good fixtures, I'd be a lot more concerned about their minutes. But I think, given how well they did play, that should instill a level of confidence in Emery that, these two, we can actually be a solid defensive unit with these two in it. So that was kind of my only thinking behind that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, basically, that sort of principle. Now, which leads us quite nicely on to, if it is broke, do we need to go fix it? And that's Juf and Wan-Bissaka. So, Juf and Wan-Bissaka were among some of the most popular, cheap defenders for across FPL. Is it time to panic, or are we chalking this to a one-off? There's probably no one better to talk us through it than yourself.
Don't get me wrong. So I did watch the West Ham game. First half, we were really, really good. Juve was incredible. The likes of Bowen, Fulkrug, Paqueta and Juve were all very, very good. The second half, we just absolutely capitulated. I mean, XG-wise and chances-wise, we didn't give up loads. I think Sunderland scored 3 goals from like from less than 1 XG anyway. We didn't really give up like glaring chances. 2 of them were just pretty poor from the goalkeeper. And the third one, again, it wasn't like it was a huge chance. So I don't think we need to worry that much. Juve is going to get you attacking returns regardless, to be honest. I don't think we expected many clean sheets from West Ham anyway. So I'm not really sure that much has changed since. I mean, granted, they've gone down in my list just because Sunderland was obviously one of the better fixtures in that 5 kind of game week period. Now that's out of the way, the fixtures aren't quite as good, but I still think they're both absolutely fine, especially for attacking returns.
Yeah, and I think, it's as more of just a general principle around FPL, really. This sort of knee-jerk stuff is generally not advisable. Chasing last week's points is never going to be a successful strategy. What you want to do is you want to set yourself up. And the fact is, if you went with, Juf and Wan-Bissaka in game week 1 performance should never be enough to, completely get you to reverse that decision. Otherwise, you'll have no transfers left and you'll be chasing points the whole season. So I think we definitely need a larger window. And as you say, what you saw in the first half, there are reasons to be optimistic as well there. I think just on that subject and on that game, I think one interesting sort of player to talk about could be Ballard. Now, obviously, it would look like nothing short of points chasing. But what we do see from Ballard is, I mean, it's no secret that Sunderland's fixtures are fantastic. They've got Burnley, then they've got a weakened Brentford squad, then they'll have Palace, and then they'll have Villa, and then they'll have Forest. So, the next 3 games for Sunderland are pretty much as good as they get. Now, what I found particularly interesting was Ballard's presence in the air. Now, West Ham are no slouches from defending set pieces. They've got a big unit. Ballard was able to have 4 shots on goal as a centre-back, 4 shots on goal. Now, whether that's a flash in the pan or not, we won't know. But across his last games, the game before that, granted he had 0, but then he had 4 more shots on goal in the 2 games before that. So, this is a centre-back who is, seems to gravitate towards, the end of these headers. And is a legitimate set piece threat. So when you combine it with those fixtures, I think there is actually a bit of an attacking. It doesn't seem like a flash in the pan. There could be consistent production there.
Yeah, I agree. To be fair, one thing that was quite noticeable was firstly how kind of well drilled Sunderland were from set pieces. Yep. I think they kind of realised that that's going to be a huge area for them this season. But also, every single one was aimed at Ballard. Yeah, he will just be targeted, and for good reason, to be honest. Yeah. He's very good in the air.
Monster of a bloke, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like I say, they were incredibly well drilled from set pieces, so I think that will be a common theme this season.
Yeah. So if we see Sunderland consistently keep it this tight at the back, they've kicked off with a clean sheet against a team who's not a bad attack by any means. But then, they carry that sort of clean sheet momentum into this brilliant run of fixtures. And then Ballard, also offers that fantastic set piece threat. At 4.6 million, he has gone up in price, granted, and, understandably why from points chasing. But I think he could definitely be a player to watch out for from these set pieces threat. A sort of like a really budget Gabriel, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on. And then the final one to talk about on the budget section is Man United. Now, Man United did look quite sharp against Arsenal. They did look really good. So Dorgu, Euro, these players that all find themselves around that 4.5 million mark. Are they players you'd consider bringing in?
Yeah, Dorgu especially. I mean, we know the fixtures aren't great apart from game week 3. Game week 3 fixture is obviously fantastic. Dorgu, well, I mean, Man United in general actually looked really, really good. Much better than I was expecting them to look. They do look like they've improved quite a bit. And Dorgu especially, I mean, he hit the post. He was getting forward quite a lot, more so than Dalot the other side. So I do think that Dorgu is definitely one we can be looking at. I'm not that keen on going with the centre-backs myself, but I do really like Dorgu.
Yeah, completely agree. So yeah, now on to the premium defenders, where I think there's a similar level of contention that you can find. So, I mean, we'll just touch on VVD. I mean, the defensive contributions, the man's an absolute monster, and as you said before, he can just get points from anywhere. Are you a bit concerned about how leaky Liverpool's defence has been to start the season?
A little bit, yes. I do also think the Bournemouth attack was actually very good. Yep. So I think that is one thing to note. But I just think that there's not really a type of game that doesn't suit Van Dijk. Like we saw, he's fantastic for these defensive contributions. It was 17 clearances in total for him, which is just a joke. Obviously, if that kind of lends well with being good in the air, the other end as well, which we know he is. And Liverpool, I mean, last season they were the best defence clean sheet wise. Whether we see similar levels again, I'm not too sure. But even if they're kind of around top 5, we're still going to get plenty of points from Van Dijk, given the other avenues to points as well. So for me, he's the best defender.
Yeah, just fantastic all round. When you speak about a player with a high floor, Van Dijk absolutely epitomises that. Because every fixture he lends himself and his profile well to. Now, someone else who might be a bit more fixture dependent is Porro. Now, I mean, obviously, the set piece presence, we know how attacking he is, so naturally profiles as a fantastic FPL option. 5.5 million, probably a fair price range. Anything under that, I think we'd all automatically snap him up, and anything over that, I think we'd all be a lot more hesitant. So he sort of falls in that point that makes you think about it. So is Porro someone you would prioritize getting in? Like how much urgency are you attaching to moving for Porro?
Yeah, I don't think you need to worry about it this week. I mean, obviously it's Man City this week, so there's just no reason to do anything this week. But after that, there is some really nice fixtures. I do think that he, over the next 6 game weeks, he will represent some really good value. I think he will keep up with the 6 million options during these good fixtures. Whether or not he does in the fixtures that aren't so good, probably not. But I think what we'll see from Frank and Spurs is that against the teams that are much stronger, he'll play as a wing back and they'll play a back 5, which obviously lends itself to good things FPL wise. And even in the fixtures that aren't so good, he will still be just as attacking in a back 4. So, I just think there's a lot to like about Porro. Like I say, you don't need to get him this week, but I do think that he's worth looking at from next week.
Yeah, I mean, next week, fixtures pretty much don't get better than that. I mean, they've got Bournemouth, but it is at home, in the week I'd say. And then they've got West Ham, Brighton, Wolves, and Leeds. It's just a great set of fixtures. And, it's not even like you're just getting him for a 5-week period. Even the fixtures that continue after there aren't bad at all. So I think, Porro is a fantastic option. But as you say, just wait that one extra week on him if you haven't got him in already. Now, Ait Nouri is someone who is, divides opinion a little bit. I think profile-wise, he is absolutely he's as good as it gets, and we saw him bring in some defensive contribution points as well, which, I don't think everyone expected, but, a lot of owners were pleasantly surprised with. So I think I'm imagining the main concern from him just comes from potential rotations.
Yeah, I mean, we did see a different kind of performance from him. He wasn't actually that attacking at all, really, in that game. He kind of had to deal with the Wolves wing-back in Hoover, and he dealt with him pretty well, to be honest. That's where all the defensive contributions obviously came from. I just think that Guardiola's much more suited for that role, which is a bit worrying. So when Guardiola's back, I don't think we'll see Ait Nouri playing that role. Whether that's a setup for all the games, probably not, knowing Pep. But another thing I think to think about is that over the next 3 or so weeks, City's fixtures aren't incredible anyway. So I don't think we need to like immediately jump on him, basically.
Yeah.
But he is going to be a good option if he does get the minutes. We just don't know that yet.
Yeah. I think for me, it's just, the reason he's gone up my list is just that defensive contribution insurance has actually looked, seeing that, in an attacking game, we know he's more than capable of getting points. But in a game he's asked to defend more, he's now also shown that he's really capable of chipping in with the defensive contributions. So, in the same way you're talking about Van Dijk setting up for different sorts of fixtures, whichever fixture City kind of set themselves up for, we've now shown that he's capable of getting the returns on both ends. So I think, that's decent floor. But as you say, the minutes risk is there. But if he's on the pitch, I think, that extra avenue to points is definitely lit my eyes up a little bit. Now onto, I think another good place to touch on would just definitely be the Forest boys. As fixtures go, having West Ham, Burnley, and Sunderland, and potentially a week in Palace in their next fixture is about as good as fixtures get. And we know the sort of defensive contribution monsters, Milinkovic and Morello and Kibbe, and I think they will, over these next few fixtures, they will play slightly more attacking, so it might be a bit less of a low block. So, maybe defensive contributions take a small hit, but clean sheet wise, I think, Forest are definitely in with the shout of getting some good returns.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually watched the Brentford Forest game. Forest were incredible in that game. Absolutely battered Brentford. Don't get me wrong, Brentford were pretty terrible, but Brentford didn't have all of the players they needed out there, really. I think we'll see Jordan Henderson come in for Brentford, which will help the midfield. They started with Carvalho and Lewis Potter. Again, I don't think they'll be the two supporting Thiago going forward either. So Brentford were really bad, but Nottingham Forest were also really good. And that did limit the defensive contribution kind of opportunities for these centre-backs. But I don't think that particularly matters. If the clean sheet chance is high, then the defensive contribution chance matters a lot less. And I think that'll be the case in these next games.
Yeah. And I think, we, especially in the case of someone like Nico Williams, we know how attacking he can be. But again, it's what you're seeing. The eye test is just absolutely there for Forest and particularly their defence this season. So, I would be absolutely shocked if they don't come out with 2 or even more clean sheets from, that really nice fixture period. So yeah, that rounds out the premium defender segment and indeed the defender segment. Let us know what you think of our lists. Let us know if there's anyone we missed, and we will see you again for the midfielders. Right, welcome back to the midfielders segment. As always, we will get started with the budget midfielders. I think the only logical place to start here really seems to be the biggest debate in FPL at the moment, and that's the Reinders v Anderson debate. Now, the overarching key point in all of this is both looked really good. If you have 5.6 million, 5.5 million, whatever, do not move from one to the other. It is not worth a transfer. They both look great. Now, saying that, Reinders is probably a fave of mine, but ever so slightly. But I think Brad would probably agree that, not worth moving between the two.
Yeah, I do think Reinders' performance was a bit of a joke, to be fair. Like, probably one of the better debuts I've seen in the Premier League. But I also watched Forest, and Anderson was actually incredible as well. He was playing way higher, more attacking than I expected him to. At points, he was like getting in the box and making these runs similar to Reinders, those like late runs into the box. He was on all the set pieces, all corners, a lot of free kicks, and he even had a big chance that he missed. If he scored that, I think it would have been a different story, and people would have kind of held them in similar regard. regardless, like you say, don't use a transfer to switch them. They're both unbelievable.
Yeah. And, I think now is as good a time as any, really. If you're looking at accommodating or going heavy in the rest of your team somewhere, this real plethora of 5.5, 5.6 million and under players, it's a good time to do it given, the resources at your disposal. Now, another player who had an electric debut was Kudus. Granted it was against Burnley, so we will have to take that with a pinch of salt. But I mean, he looked everywhere. He looked dangerous, and 6.5 million is looking like cracking value.
Yeah, he looked like he was kind of back to the player he was when he first came to West Ham, almost. Which he just looks so dangerous. He's so difficult to get off the ball. Yeah. And he did actually have quite a decent end product in that game against Spurs. He put a couple of nice balls into Richarlison. So I do think we can worry a bit less about his minutes now. I think that was potentially an issue. It still is a little bit, but I can't see him, with his performances recently, I can't see him not starting games anytime soon.
Yeah, I think, there are people who are concerned that Eze will eat into his minutes, or, how... Tottenham just do like to chop and change. But I think, as you can see, with the Son departure and the Maddison injury, I think even with Eze joining a performance like that, you can expect Kudus to be starting games. So I think there's definitely way less reason to be concerned about his minutes after that. It's also worth mentioning that, after the top four here, in terms of players you'd probably legitimately consider near the top of your list, there's a bit of a drop off. These top four could more than be considered for a best 11, but after that it gets a little bit dicey. Saying that, though, another place I think there is great value, and as a Newcastle fan it feels very weird. I've sort of been blowing Sunderland's horn quite a lot, but I think Adingra, I did catch them, but Adingra did look very, very dangerous as well. Now, what we did see from Sunderland is they weren't just trying to pinch a win. Sunderland were going at West Ham, and I just think with their fixtures coming up, Burnley, Brentford, Palace in the next three, I think there's no reason we can't see even more returns from Adingra. I just think he looked very dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was actually very good. It looked like he was kind of the player that they were almost trying to get the ball to as much as possible. And he did kind of deliver whenever he got the ball. He's clearly very talented. And yeah, I do agree. I think if the fixtures weren't very good, then he would be a bit pointless to go to, given the other guys. But I do think with these fixtures, he is definitely worth kind of almost a punt, I guess. If you started with him as well, I wouldn't be going to Reinders or Anderson. I mean, I do think that they're better options, but I don't think it's worth a transfer because I think the fixtures are really good.
Exactly. Especially considering this week, Forest have Palace, and City have Spurs, but Sunderland have Burnley, for example, which I would, just in that specific next fixture alone, I would back I would back Adingra to return ahead of Reinders and Anderson, just because it's Burnley away, and Burnley are coming off the end of a 3-0 hiding, and Sunderland are coming off the end of a 3-0 walloping. So I'd say there is, no reason to move off Adingra to the other two. As Brad just said, I think he looked great in the fixtures there. Now, Tavernier as well. Tavernier's an interesting one. Sort of flew under my radar a bit, if I'm being honest. I think Bournemouth, even though they were under the end of a 4-2, I think, it's naturally going to cause a couple of players to fly under a radar when you're on the end of a beating like that. But, it was to Liverpool, and I think, there is, again, some upside at that price.
Yeah, I think the one problem is that his minutes aren't necessarily assured. I mean, Dango's now left, which makes him a little bit more assured. But I do wonder when Kluivert comes back in, whether Tavernier is the one to drop out or whether it be Brooks, who knows. But I do think what we saw with Tavernier, and this wasn't a one-off against Liverpool, he's really, really good for defensive contributions. He's great for ball recoveries. So I do think, again, he's someone who does have quite a few avenues to points. We saw last season that creatively he was pretty good. But also, ball recovery-wise, he is actually pretty good. He's not going to be getting you 15 pointers every week, but he could tick along quite nicely.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's just at that price point as well. There's no reason why in a good run of fixtures you can't see him get involved on either end. So now that leaves us on to the premium midfielders segment where, probably, as you can see, a bit less movement overall, but that's only natural. I think a good place to get started will be with Mbuemo and Cunha. Now, we saw Mbuemo and Cunha both looked fantastic. They both looked very busy. They both looked dangerous. I mean, you have to say Man United were unlucky not to get a point against Arsenal or not to get something from that game. They were the better team. I don't think anyone would argue with that. But again, Cunha and Mbuemo just seem to have injected this real creative spark into this United team, and I think against other opposition, maybe ones which don't defend as well as Arsenal, I think there's no reason we can't see the floodgates open for both of them.
Yeah, they were both really good. Man United in general are actually a lot better than I expected them to be. I did expect these new signings to improve them, but not this quickly. They were both unbelievable. They were both at the top of the kind of shots charts in the league as well for this game week, which is always a good sign. Cunha had 3 shots on target. I think Mbeumo had more shots but less on target. Regardless, both still very dangerous. The only reason they're not in my lists at the moment is because of the fixtures. The fixtures aren't that great for the next few weeks, but as the weeks go on, they will definitely be coming into my lists and coming up my list for sure, just as those fixtures, those bad ones kind of drop off and better ones come in.
Yeah. As you say, they've got City, Chelsea, and Liverpool as 3 of their next 7, which are sub-ideal fixtures to say the least. But after that, it does definitely clear up a bit. I think there is reason to be optimistic even with those fixtures, though, and that's why they're in my list. I think if they look that dangerous against an Arsenal, then I don't see any reason they wouldn't be able to look that dangerous or really give it a crack or get a goal against some of these better teams as well. So I think if you are thinking about Mbuemo or Cunha, I think you've got a lot of reason to be optimistic. And if you started with them in your team, there's absolutely no reason to move off them just because they didn't return, because they did look very, very dangerous. Now, just on that subject, a team that didn't look as dangerous but still managed to get that win. So Arsenal, I think, even though Saka hasn't gone down our list, he's still Bukayo Saka. He's still, Arsenal was still a great outfit. But the reports that Saka has been taken off penalties and, penalties will now be given to Gyökeres instead. Even though, you don't see him slide down this list per se, I think in terms of his price tag, I think it definitely takes a chunk out of it value-wise.
Yeah, massively. I mean, the reports seem quite solid. I guess we will actually need to see it happen in a game first. But yeah, for me, if he's not on penalties, 10 million is very steep.
Yeah.
We know he'll still be dangerous regardless. Arsenal will be one of the better teams, the better attacks, and he will be at the heart of it. So he will still be a very good asset. But I'm just not sure he'll be worth 10 million if he's not on penalties. I don't think. I mean, the fixtures aren't, apart from this week, the fixtures aren't the best at the moment anyway. So I didn't plan to go there soon. But that will, if Gyökeres is definitely going to be on penalties, then that will put me off, even when the fixtures are a bit better.
Yeah, completely agree. I think I can't remember the last time someone that expensive wasn't on penalties. I just think it just really lowers his floor a bit more to just levels that you don't want to associate £10 million with from a risk standpoint. I think now moving on to Semenyo. I mean, Semenyo, we spoke about at the start of the season. We both had him quite high at the start of the season, and I think there are reasons to be encouraged about that performance. He was greedy. He was direct. He was, which we even saw last season. But are you a little bit concerned about, once Kluivert's back in the fold, or do you think these sorts of Semenyo performances are here to stay? Because the fixtures look really good for Bournemouth.
Yeah, the fixtures are unbelievable. If you watched the player rankings last year, you'll know how much we both love Semenyo. This isn't his performance against Liverpool, is just him carrying over from what he was doing last season anyway, with Kluivert. So I don't see this Semenyo going anywhere, and these fixtures will obviously help that. He performed against Liverpool, whose defence did look a bit shaky, don't get me wrong. But yeah, the Bournemouth attack doesn't seem to have been hampered by all the defensive changes either, which is nice to see because I thought that could happen. But yeah, Semenyo just continues to be a good option. He, like I say, is just carrying on from what he was doing last season. And I think that 7 million is cheap for what he is.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, on to the final talking point. And at the minute, I will say, hate watching Liverpool is quite a good hobby. Even though they did win, it is worth pointing out that Verts had an absolute stinker, and that's why you find him at the bottom of my list. No prizes for guessing who I support, but I just think if you watch that performance, he did just seem, of course it's a one game sample, by the way. I just want to put that out there. Of course it's a one game sample, but Liverpool have had quite a few other players who looked on the pace, up for it, and ready for the game. And I just felt like Verts was a little bit swallowed up by that. He didn't really do a huge amount. So I think if you do have that budget, that 8.5 million budget, I think if he didn't cost that much, the opportunity cost wouldn't be as bad. But 8.5 million for that sort of performance would just get you thinking. And I think it's mainly because the players above him, you look at them, your Cunhas, your Semenyos, your Mbuemos, these players just played excellent and hit the ground running. So I think that's why Verts finds himself where he is.
They did. I just think that this is. I still believe that at the end of the season we'll be looking at 8.5 million as cheap for Verts. I think that he's coming underpriced. Yes, his first performance wasn't the best, but it's not like he'll get rotated and not start now, like potentially others might. He will play games. He is ridiculously talented. He plays for the best team in the league going forward. Yeah. I can't see him being a problem long term. Now, I wouldn't be buying him right now, but that's mainly because of the fixtures, I think. However, I also wouldn't be selling him right now. I've got him in my team. And for me, he's going absolutely nowhere. I think we will see him start to perform over the next few weeks. It might take a week or two, a couple of games for him to actually kind of get up to the speed. Because like you say, he did look a little bit off of it. There was times where he had the ball and in typical new player to the Premier League fashion, thought he had more time than he did. But yeah. I just think that he will quite quickly get up to speed and we'll see him become pretty impressive, I'd say.
Yeah, but I think, and that's the main reason that he finds himself where he is, in my list, because every single other player on both of our lists is absolutely Prem proven. They're known producers in the Prem. Now he's the only one who's yet to do it in the Prem. So naturally, what we see whenever a player comes over, they either hit the ground running or it takes them a bit of time to acclimatize. And Verts, off the back of that performance, just looks like he's going to be one of those players who takes a bit of time to acclimatize. So, if you haven't got him, absolutely don't go near him yet. But I think, that Newcastle fixture, we are going to be we're going to be, because it's Liverpool, we're going to be unbelievably up for it. No player in the middle of the pitch is going to get time on the ball. We might lose 10-0, but we'll do it fouling players and, making sure that it's a nasty game. And then, Arsenal straight after that. So I think it's hard to, off the back of this performance, it's just hard to see a way that Verts clicks his fingers and is suddenly up to speed in two really, really difficult fixtures. So I think that's just why he finds himself, low down the list for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's better. And I actually think, based on what we saw in game week 1, the Newcastle fixture will be more difficult than the Arsenal fixture, I'd say.
Yep.
Newcastle looked surprisingly good in game week 1. I didn't expect Newcastle to look quite as good as they did. So I do think this week will be tough. But if Arsenal play like they did against United, then I don't mind that fixture one bit. But I do expect Arsenal to probably sort themselves out a little bit. Yeah.
And I think that, the reason is that it'll be where Newcastle did look really, really good is off the ball. We look really, really super, super energized. And I think at St. James's Park against Liverpool, when we're off the ball and trying to get the ball, I think, if there is one game in the season with everything around it that players might not get as much time on the ball, it's probably that one. I think Joel Linton will be charging around like an absolute, and Bruno and Tonali will be charging around like madmen. And it's hard to get time on the ball with those three in midfield anyway. So I think that's part of where Verts gets stocked. But those Burnley, following that, he's got Burnley and Everton and then Palace, and those are like a fantastic set of three for him to get straight back on track, because the talent is undeniable for sure. The talent is undeniable. So yeah, definitely not worth moving off. But just because of those couple fixtures, I would be a little bit cautious about bringing him in or anything like that. So yeah, that rounds out the premium midfielder segment and indeed the midfielders. Let us know what you think of our lists. Let us know if there's anyone we missed, and we will see you again for the forwards. Hi guys, welcome back to the forwards segment. We will get started straight away with the budget forwards. I think a good place to start would be Strand Larsen. Even though Wolves did lose, he did look great against City. But also, there is that potential move to Newcastle in his back pocket. There was a bit of interest there from Newcastle. So, if he gets that Newcastle move, I think he probably just sits right at the top of this list, for eternity.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, maybe he does anyway, even if he's at Wolves, just because I think there's quite high chances on penalties this season. Not that Wolves got any penalties last year, but they could this year. And I think if he's on penalties at 6.5 million, he looks great. I was worried about the two teams I was worried about before the season was Wolves and Everton going forward. Everton have shown that they are useless, and I was right to worry about them. But Wolves have shown that they were actually quite good against City. Yes, they lost quite heavily, but it looked like everything was geared to getting chances for Strand Larsen. Like they had certainly the right wing back in Keanu Hoover was absolutely bombing down the wing and trying to put balls into Strand Larsen. It just looks like it's all geared to feed him, which I think is perfect. And he just takes shots as soon as he gets the ball, he'll shoot pretty much, which as kind of the FPL teams is perfect.
Yeah. And, we saw last season, I mean, even when Cunha was out, his production was fantastic while Cunha was out. I think they ended up with like 14 goals or something like that. 14, I might have that wrong. Yeah, 14, which, is for a 6.5 million striker is absolutely fantastic output. So, and Wolves' fixtures, I mean, if you look outside of the next five, we normally just refer to the next five, but if you look outside of the next five, they've got Everton in week 2, Leeds in week 4, and then Brighton, Sunderland, Burnley, and Fulham in the 4 after that. These are just fantastic fixtures. So if you've got any sort of cheap striker position that needs to be filled, I think Strand Larsen is one of those players you can just set there and leave until, around about game week 10, 11. He is a fantastic option at 6.5 million. And if he's on pens, even better. And if he gets that Newcastle move, then even better. So there's lots of reasons to be optimistic about Strand Larsen. Now, the list does get a little bit depressing, to say the least, after that. I think one area, again, which is more sort of upside driven, is Richarlison. So Richarlison, Solanke did have a knock to start the season. It was well known that he had a knock. And, we all assumed that he would just take the spot back. But, Richarlison put in a really good performance. Solanke is now back in the squad. He's coming on as a sub. So, yeah, how do you think that one shakes out there?
I think that in the last 2 games, Richarlison has performed well enough that there's a conversation there, at least. Or at least Richarlison will get good enough minutes. It's not, I think, before these 2 games, it was probably the case that it was just going to be Solanke up front. And that was kind of all there was to it. I don't think that's the case now. I think Richarlison has actually performed really well in these last 2 games. So I think there might even be a case that it's Richarlison's spot to lose until Solanke can prove that he can do anything better. Who knows? But 2 good strikers essentially now. So yeah, both could potentially get minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And, if Richarlison does end up winning that battle and Spurs do end up keeping that momentum going forward, then I think you see, him and Strand Larsen just standalones at the top of this list and in their own tier. So yeah, definitely some potential upside there. Now, moving on to the premium forwards. I mean, again, quite a lot of movement, as you can see. I think the main player worth talking about, at least on my end, is Ekitike. I mean, he looked absolutely fantastic. He looks every part, the player that, he looks every part of the player that Liverpool promised, every part of his price tag, spearheading the most dangerous attack in the Premier League. There is not much to dislike about Ekitike. I think he can even make a mockery of his price tag.
Yeah, if Liverpool don't sign another striker, then he will. That is cheap. Even at like 9 million, that is still cheap, pretty much. I'd say. I am maybe just a little bit more cautious on him because I do think that there's still, even though obviously the whole thing with Isak is where it is, I still think there is a chance that Isak goes to Liverpool, which is the reason that he's not 2 or 3 for me.
Yeah, and it's completely fair. I think at this point, from all I see from Newcastle insiders, it seems like there's absolutely no planet we can let Isak leave now. I think there's too much reputation on the line. The precedent would just be absolutely dreadful if we now cave in. So I'm now feel fairly confident in hitching my wagon to Ekitike being Liverpool's starting striker for the season. So yeah, and if he plays anywhere near like he does for the rest of the season, I think you could potentially be looking at a 20-goal season. There's absolutely no reason it can be up there near those levels. Now, another man who's probably struggled a bit in his sort of debut game, and a little bit in preseason, and that's Gyökeres. The fact he costs more than Ekitike, I think, is completely upside down. I don't see why you would ever go for Gyökeres if you didn't have Ekitike. But as we mentioned before, there is those positive reports that he may be given penalties. So their fixtures over the next 5, there's absolutely no reason you should move for Gyökeres anyway. That Liverpool in game week 2, then City and Newcastle in 4 and 5. Stay away from him like don't touch him with a barge pole at the moment. But I think down the line, I do have faith in his abilities as a player. And spearheading the Arsenal attack, I think there is reason to be encouraged.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I made my list before 2 key pieces of news, which would have him much higher if I made the list after. One of which was the penalty situation. If he's on penalties at 9 million, I think that is actually a very good value pick. Also, Kai Havertz is injured now. That also makes him play a lot more minutes. I did think that there was going to be some rotation between the 2. But with Havertz out injured, I think Gyökeres just gets a lot more minutes. He would genuinely be top 5 for me now if I made the list right now. And I think if he's on penalties and Havertz isn't around, then I actually think 9 million is cheap. I think those 2 pieces of information are quite key in that I think he's not a very good option if not on penalties and with Havertz around. But the fact that those 2 things are true makes him actually a very good option now, I think.
Yeah. I think the fact he has penalties and Havertz is out is why I've got him at 5. Those are great reasons for him to be high. The only reason he's not above your Woods or your Watkins for me is because of those fixtures. Liverpool in 2, City and Newcastle. I think once those fixtures clear up, and after that they've got the likes of West Ham, Fulham, Palace, Burnley, Sunderland as the next 5. I think we could really see him get on track in those games and bang some serious goals. But yeah, at the moment, absolutely no rush to move for Gyökeres. So just definitely sit and wait on that one. Now another interesting point. I mean, mainly just a slightly funner talking point. I've got him, about mid-table. But you're very high on Mateta. Then you've got him above your Ekitikes and your Woods. Is that just the Eze leaving news? You don't think will affect his output too much?
I don't think so. I think there's pros and cons to either side. I mean, if Eze stays, then great. Palace look really good, and they continue to just play how they've been playing, which is good for Mateta. if Eze leaves, then Mateta is definitely 100% on penalties, which might be the case anyway. But there is a little bit of doubt. I think either way, I don't see Eze leaving. I think it might hamper Palace a bit, but I don't think it hampers Palace enough that Mateta isn't a good option now. I think that Palace are just a very, very good attack. And yeah, Mateta is on penalties as well, so just a great option.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that is one thing, to be encouraged about. We have seen Palace, especially in the Community Shield, they've shown that they can be very dangerous attacking wise. So, I also just love the profile of Mateta. Anyone who owned him last season will know, having that consistent flow right there was absolutely fantastic. Now, one player that has probably taken a hit, and I know a lot of people did start with, probably just worth mentioning quickly, is Jared Bowen. Now, given the plethora of options, your Woods, your Matetas, at this sort of price range, do you move off Bowen now?
I don't think anything's changed since before game week 1 in that respect. In that, if you bought him, you knew that he had not great fixtures after Sunderland anyway. Yeah. I think that's the only thing that has changed in the last week. I think that in that game against Sunderland, certainly in the first half, he was very good. He looked very dangerous, as did a couple of West Ham players. The fact that he didn't return in that game isn't ideal because obviously if you owned him, that was the best fixture in the next however many. But presumably you had some sort of plan after that Sunderland fixture if you did own him, and I don't think anything's changed in that respect, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think for me it may be slightly different. I think, Sunderland was meant to be the game. That was meant to be the game that West Ham's attack fired. But instead what we saw was, the opposite. Now, even though the FDR, would show, the next 3 games as grey, I think Chelsea, Forest away, and then Spurs are not easy fixtures at all. And so I think, where other players I would probably have more patience to wait and see, I just think the way Forest are playing, someone like Wood would be a real draw for me. It would be hard for me not to make that transfer, just even based off that one game and the next set of fixtures. Forest having West Ham, Burnley and Sunderland in their next 5 and Palace, I think something like that would be enough to tempt me to make that move and use that transfer.
I agree, but I think that I agree. I just think that if you started with Bowen, then you clearly wanted Bowen, if that makes sense. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't have started with Bowen, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't have had that decision, because I think that over a 5-game week period, from the beginning of the season, Wood was a better option, like some of these other guys as well. So I do agree with you. I wouldn't have started with Bowen for that reason, but I don't think anything's changed in that sense. Wood is fantastic because of his fixtures, and Forest look really good, and West Ham's fixtures are tougher.
Yeah, and for the same exact reason, I didn't start with Bowen either. But I think if I did start with Bowen, well, I guess what I'm saying is I could forgive you for knee jerking towards a Wood, for example, because it wasn't just a 2-0 loss to like a Brighton or a Brentford. It was a 3-0 loss to a promoted side.
So I think, although I do think there's some more. I don't know. It's just going to make me.
It's definitely nuanced. It's definitely nuanced a bit for sure.
Yeah, because it was really low XG goals. We didn't get battered by Sunderland in any form. In the first half, we were very, very good, and in the second half, we capitulated essentially. I don't think there's anything. I don't think we learned anything in that game that we didn't know before game week 1, in that sense. But I do agree. Over the next 5 weeks, Chris Wood is a lot better than Jared Bowen for sure.
Yeah, I think it's just that combination. If it was just West Ham looking bad, or not looking as dangerous as they should have against the Sunderland, then probably not. And if Forest looked average in their first fixture, but because Forest looked so great and West Ham looked quite bad, those two things, I think, are just enough to push me over to a knee-jerk potential. But yeah, like I said, it's easy. You generally want to avoid those knee-jerk reactions, but yeah, I think it's definitely one move I would for sure think about. So yeah, that rounds out the forwards segment and indeed the player rankings video. Let us know what you think of our lists. Let us know if there's anyone we missed, and we will see you again next week.
And that is all for this one. Like I said in the intro, make sure you check out ingenuityfantasy.com. The link is in the description to the video. But yeah, if you liked it, do hit like, do subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.